Hi, I'm Betty. Welcome to my kitchen. We recently did a video on making croque monsieur, the very elegant French ham and cheese sandwich. And the bread I used was brioche. Since then, I've had a number of requests on how to make that bread. It can be quite difficult to find in your local supermarket, and if you do find it, it's very expensive. You can make 2 loaves at home for less than half of what you'd pay for one in the store. And if you have a stand mixer, a good strong mixer with a dough hook, it's one of the easiest breads to make going. In addition to the usual flour, salt, yeast, of course, and a little sugar that you would find normally in bread, this bread also is quite rich. It contains half a dozen eggs and half a pound of butter. But again, it's quite a simple bread to make. And we're going to start by adding our yeast. This is the equivalent of 1 packet of yeast, which is 2 1/4 teaspoons. Put that in our bowl along with some warm milk. You want the milk to be about 110 degrees or so. The exact temperature, of course, is not crucial. And to that, I'm going to add my sugar. I know my yeast is fresh, but if you want to check and make sure that the yeast you're using is quite fresh, let it sit for about 5 minutes, and it'll develop a slight froth on top, and that way you'll know it's live. Yeast keeps for a very long time in the refrigerator, and even longer in the freezer. Because I know the yeast I'm using is quite fresh, I'm going to start adding my other ingredients, the first of which are the 6 eggs. And I'm going to let the mixer run until those are well incorporated. Once the eggs are beaten in, I'm going to start adding the flour. And I'll do that in about 3 additions, beating it well each time. Now that the flour is all in, I'm going to add the butter, a pat or 2 at a time. This butter, of course, is at room temperature. It's quite soft. And again, mix it well until you see the butter pretty much disappeared. Now that that butter has been incorporated into the batter, I'm going to take this paddle attachment out, scrape down the bowl, and we'll just put that on a medium speed and let this go for about 5 or 6 minutes. All right, the dough has finished kneading, and I have ready a buttered bowl, and I'm simply going to turn this out into that bowl. I'm going to let it sit out at room temperature to proof for about 2 hours, covered with plastic wrap. And at the end of the 2 hours, it's going to go into the refrigerator and rest overnight. And we'll shape, raise, and bake the loaves tomorrow, so it doesn't dry out. And I'm just going to leave it here on the counter, as I said, for about 2 hours before putting it in the refrigerator overnight. We're back to finish off our brioche bread loaves. The dough has rested overnight in the refrigerator. It has risen slightly. Not a great deal, but we're going to let it proof further. What I'm going to do first is just take it out of this bowl. The dough is a little sticky, so I'm just going to sprinkle the dough with a little bit of flour. Let's see, put some on the board. There we go. And really all I need to do is get this into sort of a log shape so that I can divide it in 2. It doesn't require any further kneading. It's one of the nice things about this bread. Your mixer does all the work for you. I'm going to divide this in 2. That I have ready 2 approximately 8.5 by 4.5 bread pans that I've lightly greased with butter, using my favorite method of a silicone brush, which is I love because it gets into all the crevices. Nice and easy. So what we're going to do is just pat this out. want to get it about 8 inches in length and fairly even. I can see it's a little thinner at this end. And then all we're going to do is roll it up. This beautiful, rich bread dough with all those eggs and butter. Really quite delicious. It's can almost be considered a pastry, and has lots of uses. From just the bread for making sandwiches like our wonderful croque monsieur to making really fabulous French toast. So we're just going to plop that in there, and I'll repeat with the second piece of dough. And of course, when you put it in the pan, you want to make sure that you have the seam side down, so you'll get a nice smooth top on your finished bread. Now that this is ready, I'm going to cover these with a damp cloth and let them rise for about 2 to 2.5 hours until they mound up on top of the pan. If your kitchen is very warm, leave them in your kitchen. My oven has a wonderful setting for proofing bread. It goes to 100 degrees. So if you have that, by all means use it. If it's not and your kitchen's cool, turn your oven on as low as it will go, then turn it off and put your loaves in to rise there. Just cover them lightly and let the yeast do its work. So the loaves have risen. I've taken them out of the oven. And unfortunately, as sometimes happens, the damp towel stuck to the top. So the surface is a little irregular, which won't affect the taste, of course, at all. If you want to avoid this, before putting the damp cloth on, put a little piece of plastic wrap, which you've lightly buttered, on top first. So I'm going to top these with an egg wash. And to make that, I'm just going to beat up an egg, quite well in fact. I want to get that good and mixed. And anytime I'm using an egg wash, I like to take the little extra step of straining it, because I don't want to get any of those big lumps of egg on my beautiful bread. And we don't need too much of this. Just let that strain through a little. And I probably have enough right there. But just using a pastry brush, I'm going to lightly brush the tops of these. This helps give brioche its traditional dark golden brown crust. I'm going to bake these in my oven, which I've preheated to 375 degrees. And they're going to take about 40 minutes. But at about 30 minutes, I'm going to check them. I want to make sure the top isn't getting too brown. And if it is, I'll just cover these lightly with a piece of foil to prevent further browning. But it is traditional to have a lovely dark brown crust on these. And it's a very tender crust. Looks pretty good. Okay, so these are ready to pop into the oven. And there they go. And I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes to remind me to check on them. All right, we're at the 30-minute mark, and I just want to check the color on these. They look beautiful, and I don't think I'm going to bother covering them with foil because I think they'll be just fine for another 10 minutes. The timer is telling me my bread is done, and I can almost tell by the smell. I wish you could enjoy it with us. I guess there's a reason they say if you want to sell a house, have something wonderful baking in your oven. There, a beautiful golden brioche. So there you have it, 2 beautiful brioche loaves, one to use now and one to pop in the freezer for later. Enjoy.